Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. Herogasm has finally arrived. Hopefully people are finding ways to cope. Treat yourself to some self-care because this episode was a lot. I know most episodes of The Boys are a lot, but some of these people were really putting me through it. Normally I try to go through things in my reviews on a character by character basis, but some of this just needs to be done sequentially because it's a very dense mess in this episode for a lot of these people. Tangled webs have been woven. Before we do that though, I did say in my spoiler-free review of this episode that I would give a quick rundown of the 4 characters that I singled out in this episode as my favorites for this episode. I'm assuming you were able to figure it out for yourself now that you've seen the episode, but I said I would do it, so I'm doing it. In alphabetical order, first up is Annie. Annie was handling it in this episode. Annie was handling everyone. She was handling Victoria and rejecting her dirty political strategizing. She was handling Hughie for being an ain't boyfriend and in general an ain't person. She was handling MM and making him see that he needed to get it together and start providing medical attention to badly injured people. And she was handling Vought by exposing them live on air and quitting the 7. Next up was A-Train. What he did at the very end of this episode, legendary behavior. Points were made. Don't worry, I will say more about that particular development, but this is just a quick rundown of the list I shared in my spoiler-free review. Emphasis on quick. Next up is Kimiko. She's always one of my favorites, and this week was no exception. She did what needed to be done. She's not a monster. She's a survivor. You don't want to get got? Then don't go after Kimiko and don't go after her man. It's really not that complicated. Finally, Soldier Boy. Listen, anyone that demeans, clowns, or physically assaults Homelander can get a shout out. It's the way he looked at Homelander just so deeply unimpressed that really got me going. I know Soldier Boy is the bad guy. I've been watching, I've seen and heard all the nasty, rotten things he's done. However, that doesn't mean that it's not satisfying to see Soldier Boy come in and be so unbothered by Homelander. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't care that you are now Vought's number 1, and he's just going to put you in your place. And I will sit here, cheerful as can be, with my popcorn, or if not popcorn, then maybe something else, maybe some udon. Now let's go through things with a bit more specificity. This week's episode opened with a parody of the Celebrities Singing Imagine video. I don't know if recreating and parodying this did all that much to offer the show's larger socio-political commentary, but if you watched my spoiler-free review, you know that I hinted at some harsher opinions or criticism that would be incoming, and this is where I had the problem. My issue wasn't so much to do with the parody itself, but the fact that I was forced against my will to look at Ashton Kutcher. I don't appreciate seeing a cop sprung on me like that. Now, if you don't already know this, this is someone who happily mascots themselves for the CIA, who is happy to spread pernicious rhetoric that is in line with their agenda, and presents himself as a benevolent do-gooder when all the while he is out here providing surveillance technology to cops. It's insidious behavior. It's giving the same foul odor as Ronald Reagan being an informant to the HUAC, to the FBI, all of that when he was still working in Hollywood. Anyone who happily mascots themselves for the same organization that did MK Ultra is no one I want to see presented in a lighthearted comedic manner on a show like The Boys. I'm not naive. I know that Hollywood is overflowing with propaganda projects, and that when you're a struggling actor who isn't established yet in your career, you're probably going to do a few episodic appearances in propaganda shows simply because there's just so many of them, and you're trying to just get some experience, you're trying to get your SAG card. I understand. But for The Boys as a show to try to present itself as being in the know about things like police brutality, the corrupt tactics of large corporations, and so on and so forth, only to go ahead and endorse a celebrity mascot for the CIA, I am less than impressed. Don't present yourself as an ACOB show and then invite cops on your show. It's not rocket science.
That's just my opinion. Everybody got an opinion.
So Homelander, Ashley, and the Deep find out that Soldier Boy is back, and I don't know about all of you, but I was intrigued by the fact that Homelander seems to have a sort of affinity for Black Noir. I didn't think he liked anyone except for maybe Stormfront, but she kind of had to force him into liking her. We all saw that first hookup scene of theirs, and we are all still carrying the mental scars from it. But Black Noir is clearly shaken up by this revelation that Soldier Boy is back because he went and cut his tracker out of his arm so he could go run off. Imagine being a working actor just trying to book any gig so you can build up your credits, and then you land yourself a gig on The Boys, and all you have to do is stand in an elevator and be scared, horrified, get blood sprayed on you, and take a tracker from Black Noir when he hands it to you. Can I get a gig like that? I don't have to do any dangerous stunts. I don't have to get yelled at by any one of these awful characters at Vought, or even Billy Butcher for that matter. Just a comfy, quiet day player gig on a really cool show. I don't know who this actress is, but I'm happy for her. Jumping ahead now to Soldier Boy finally getting to do his thing on this show. I really enjoyed his material in the motel room because we get a lot more insight into his character, but also he's really funny. And the comedy in this scene for me comes from both the absurdity of how much his character is in fact the embodiment of toxic masculinity, but also that juxtaposition of having someone who looks like Jensen Ackles speaking like a boomer. His line delivery is very good. It's things like that perfectly timed pause before he goes, "You made those words up," when Huey is asking him if he knows about modern technological things like GPS and the internet. Also, I have to really stress that I mean it when I say this man is the embodiment of toxic masculinity. When he was talking about how he used to imagine himself starting a family and having boys that he would raise to be men, I can't really explain it, but something about the way he said that, I just instantly knew if Soldier Boy ever had sons that turned out to be LGBT+, he would be an absolute nightmare about it. And you have to really give it up to Jensen as a performer because he's not even saying anything specific in that immediate moment about that specific issue, but it's just what I felt in my gut when he said that line. Then again, him saying a line like, "What passes for a man today? Christ on a cross." This isn't a man who comes across as particularly subtle about expressing his regressive beliefs. Another detail we got about Soldier Boy was him appearing in a movie in which he was expressing support for the Afghan Mujahideen. And this is another reason why I get annoyed when the show is doing something as nonsensical as having a CIA celebrity mascot cameo in the show when you're so blatantly calling out Operation Cyclone, which was a CIA op to arm, train, and fund the Mujahideen, who were jihadists, because the US wanted to undermine a socialist Afghanistan as well as use the Mujahideen as a proxy against the Soviet Union. The Mujahideen eventually became the Taliban, by the way. Convenient how corporate mainstream media from the imperial core doesn't like to mention that when they are racially stereotyping the Middle East in order to try to brainwash the masses into supporting their war crimes. This season we have some very direct references to things like Operation Condor in Latin America and Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan, but it's an added bonus that they were dragging the imperialist propaganda action films from the 1980s like Rambo 3, in which Sylvester Stallone cheerfully played into the campaign to make people think that the Mujahideen were the good guys. But then after a certain event happened in 2001, they changed those credits to no longer be dedicated to the Mujahideen. And for those of you who buy into the historical revisionist propaganda campaign that claims, "Oh no, those credits never said that," you're kind of missing the part where the entire plot of the film Rambo 3 is Rambo allying himself with the Mujahideen. Nitpicking the post-credits text is pointless. The plot is still cold hard evidence of what the propaganda peddlers were using Hollywood for at that particular moment in time. Anyway, getting back to The Boys, Homelander is just a nightmare in this episode. His rant on television is just more of what I've already mentioned in a previous review of The Boys Season 3, where Homelander's insistence that everything is fine and safe when it's most definitely not is a very unsubtle reference to the socio-political tension during the Rona. I've already explained it. It also kind of reminds me of how people were digging up clips from Steven Spielberg's Jaws during the height of all that tension and noting the parallels of the small town politician insisting things were fine when they weren't. There was a killer shark on the loose, and people died.
People were killed.
Fun little piece of trivia. Fidel Castro told Francis Ford Coppola that he loved Jaws, the movie. He said it was a Marxist picture because it showed that businessmen are ready to sell out the safety of citizens rather than close down against the invasion of sharks. That is a vibe. Anyway, I know Antony Starr is doing what needs to be done when it comes to his performance as Homelander. None of us are surprised that he's delivering. He always delivers. He's throwing temper tantrums on live television. He's talking to himself, but don't we expect that from him at this point? This is completely on brand. I don't know if I have as much to say about that when there's so much else going on with so many other characters, such as Annie. When she stood up to Victoria, ooh, it was a vibe. I really don't like Victoria. Claudia, make no mistake, is an excellent performer, but Victoria, she's just such bad news. Victoria is a spot-on depiction of sleazy Washington, D.C. politicians who pretend that they are working for the betterment of the people, but in actuality, they are only looking out for their own career advancement. So it was a very hot spot for me to watch as a viewer. She wanted to use Annie's following online, her platform as a celebrity and as a popular role model to try to garner more fans that will vote for her in political office. It really reminded me of the way a lot of Hollywood celebrities will endorse a political figure once every 4 years during a presidential election, and then that celebrity will say absolutely nothing when that candidate that they endorsed does horrendous things for the next 4 years after they've been elected. They will say nothing when that candidate issues countless drone strikes. They will say nothing when that candidate pushes to increase the annual military budget to over $800 billion a year. They will say nothing when that candidate aligns themselves with foreign governments who murder journalists, but they can post the most milquetoast socially progressive things on social media, and their fans will eat it up. What a life it must be to be praised for doing less than the bare minimum. So seeing Annie actually have some integrity instead of enabling this political tomfoolery was so deeply satisfying, because it's like the more ideal version of that scenario playing out in a way that it too rarely does in actual US Hollywood celebrity culture. Now, I know I've talked about a lot of political things in this episode, and in my defense, I think the material is what's provoking those discussions. I don't classify my channel as a politics channel. I talk about movies and television shows and entertainment media in general. If there's political subtext, we can get into that, but I don't solely seek out political commentary when deciding what I want to watch or what I want to review. Sometimes I just want to watch The Wedding Date for the 700th time and just enjoy myself.
Holy crap. You're worth every penny.
But I know that it can be a lot to hear me go on and on about political things, so let's talk about something more comedically gross. Herogasm. I feel like Eric Kripke has reached a point of realizing that he can always find comedy in messing with MM. You thought it was already a lot to have him be reunited with the Love Sausage, great name by the way, but then he bumps into a post-coital termite who gets lady juice on his favorite jacket, and then he gets splashed with, well, you know what it was. You saw it, I don't need to say it. Did anyone remember that I used the word splash in my spoiler-free review of this episode? I was being deliberately sneaky with my choice of words, just so you know. But actually, in regards to that scene, when you can hear a voice off-screen referring to MM as a yummy brown bear, was it just me, or did that voice sound like Eric Kripke's voice? I don't know for sure if that's him, but just go back and listen to it again and let me know what you think, if you're familiar or somewhat familiar with Eric's voice anyway. I'm really sad that Frenchie couldn't be at Herogasm, because they made a point of saying more than once that Frenchie always wanted to see it for himself. I'm not saying I love the idea of having another Herogasm in season 4 or perhaps another season after that, depending on how many seasons the show ends up running for. But I do like the idea of there being some sort of full circle moment where if they have a mission to do and it requires them to track someone down who happens to be at a future Herogasm, I would like for Frenchie to get to witness the mess and mayhem for himself. It could be a nice goodbye present to him before he runs away to Marseille with Kimiko. We'll talk more about Kimiko in a bit, but I want to get through my remaining points to do with things happening at Herogasm. When Huey teleported in and unexpectedly got his apology that he's been waiting to get from A-Train, a real apology, I was shook. See, so many of you online have been tweeting how angry you are at A-Train and you don't like the fact that he hasn't stuck the landing of transitioning perfectly from villain to anti-hero. I like the mess. I like that he's struggling to get there. It's so much more interesting to watch than if he had just magically flipped a switch and all of a sudden he was a good guy who allies himself with the boys. I do think he might get to that point eventually if they would like to take him there, but I think it will take a while for him to reach that point. Never in my life did I think we would get to a point in the show where I was really liking A-Train while Huey was just someone I wanted to throw my shoe at, but here we are. A-Train, that last move he made where he dragged Blue Hawk across the pavement, if you didn't enjoy the hell out of that scene, then you're just hating for no reason. Very weird to me how much hype people like Butcher and Homelander can get from certain viewers of the show, while A-Train is making his way but struggling nonetheless towards anti-hero status, and any step out of line has people lashing out at him. Quite interesting how that goes. Yeah, Huey annoyed me so much in this episode, I kid you not. When I binged my season 3 press screeners for the first time, when he and Annie were having that conversation and he's complaining about her being strong and saving him, and Annie points out that Huey was not bothered by her strength on their first date, and he says, but it does. My reaction, I kid you not, was to go, oh, I hate that. I even wrote it down in my notes because it was an audible reaction to the nonsense. It wasn't just some quiet thought that I had in my head. I said it out loud because that's how much Huey is annoying me this season.
I hope you get it together.
Annie hit Huey with her powers, and I was hyped. I wanted her to do it again.
I'ma just scoot on over and let you whack him. Get him again. Get him for me.
Annie shouldn't have to deal with this mess when she already just got traumatized walking in on the deep with an octopus. Truly nightmare fuel. This man is a menace, and I mean that with every bit of malice I can muster. I really want to stress though right now, even though I have more things I want to talk about before the kimchi section of this video, it is becoming incredibly annoying that Huey and Annie have all this relationship drama every season. Do you want to be together or not? And beyond that question, I want to ask the people who create this show, do you want these two to be together or not? I'm not saying you can't ever have them disagree, but it's exhausting that you give these two so much airtime to drive the relationship struggle bus every season, but you've made kimchi stands wait for 3 seasons for a kiss. And I mean an actual kiss, not a messy, I don't know how to give you comfort or support except through forms of hedonism type of kiss. If you want Huey and Annie to be together, just let them be together and united in their fight against Vought. This had better be the last time we do a giant philosophical rift in their relationship, or I will officially call it quits on having any meaningful emotional investment in their romance. Cyclical relationship drama is insufferable to watch. Work it out or break up.
Getting tired now, though, to me. In the beginning, I was like, okay, it's cool, ha.
One final note about Annie before we get to the final 2 main topics of this video. I love that when she gets on live at the end and she's exposing and dragging Vought, she invoked Maeve's name. At least someone on this show is thinking about Maeve and caring about her well-being. Maeve feels like such an afterthought in these episodes because of how sidelined she's been and how absent she's been. She doesn't even appear in this episode. If you heard me repeatedly emphasizing how there are too many main characters in this ensemble and things are getting stretched too thin as a result, this is what happens. We had that massive high point of her showing up at exactly the right moment to lay a beat down on Stormfront in season 2. But now what happened? Where is she?
when do it becomes...
Of course, one of the massive highlights of this episode is the beatdown of Homelander. How long have we been waiting for this? Years. It's taken years to get to a point of Homelander getting a taste of his own medicine. The build-up to this fight was so satisfying, and more specifically, I'm talking about the verbal exchange between Homelander and Soulja Boy. I said it before, but I will say it again. Soulja Boy being deeply unimpressed with Homelander, that was doing so much for me. I was very satisfied. This is truly a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because I know with absolute certainty that Soulja Boy is a bad guy. I don't want him to win at the end of this season, but when he snatched Homelander up by the cape and he ragdolled him, oh, it put him so close to being at the same level of my favorite material of this episode. We already know it's more or less impossible to dethrone my favorite character each episode to be my favorite thing about the episode, but Soulja Boy ragdolling Homelander, it was really high up there. That's what you get for not listening to Edna Mode when she said, "No capes."
No capes.
And then the laser on laser action between Butcher and Homelander, that was giving me BVS Superman versus Doomsday. They did that earlier this season too, but now we get to see it again. And you know what? It's fun to watch every time. I'm not mad at them having it happen again. Also, for as much as I dislike Butcher and Huey for taking Temp V, I won't deny that it's very funny whenever a soup finds out that they have some sort of enhancements in a fight. It's just a shame that we had Soulja Boy suffering from some performance issues, or else we could have had the fight end the way we all wanted it to.
Death to all of them.
I also find it a fascinating parallel to the end of season 2, where we had Kimiko, Annie, and Maeve teaming up to beat up Stormfront, but then this time around, it's Soulja Boy, Butcher, and Huey teaming up to fight Homelander. And there's a really interesting juxtaposition here, because the women didn't need to compromise their ethics, their morals, their values, their integrity, or anything of the sort in order to fight Stormfront and give her what she deserved. However, Butcher and Huey most definitely have, and it makes sense from a storytelling perspective since, like I've said before, Eric Kripke has said that this season is a meditation on toxic masculinity, but I also think that it speaks to a general lack of maturity and understanding in characters like Huey and Butcher, where they really think that they have to compromise something in order to beat Homelander. Destroying a fascist is the right thing to do. You don't need to question whether or not you need to compromise something essential about yourself. They should have been out looking for other soups and rally everyone together to end Homelander. This is a world that is full of superheroes, and you mean to tell me there aren't enough powers in people to gather, to team up, to stop him? Or at the very least, hack into some databases, steal some files, see if Homelander has a kryptonite, an Achilles heel. I just don't think they've exhausted all options before deciding to become bad guys. But hopefully, those of you who wanted more of Jensen Ackles are satisfied with this episode. Like I said in my spoiler-free review, you had a bit of everything in this episode for him as a character. Monologue, comedy, action, drama, but of course, as always, we've got to save my favorite for last. Kimiko, every week she does exactly what needs to be done and stays iconic and legendary from start to finish. Did you know that you can pick handcuffs with a popsicle stick? I didn't know that, but if anyone can do it, it's Kimiko. Despite how upset I was that Soulja Boy hurt Kimiko, I am glad that we got to see this moment where she absolutely handles a henchman even without having her powers.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
It's definitely more of a struggle for her, but she still perseveres and she still wins. And it really breaks my heart that Kimiko sees herself as a monster and she's now deep in this headspace of self-loathing where she thinks that she was already a monster and that she is not able to blame it on the Compound V. Someone really needs to let her know that she is a revolutionary and she is fighting from a place of love. If she didn't fight, she would have died, Frenchie's ex would have died, and Frenchie would have died. She saved all of their lives, and that does not make her a monster. She is not sitting around twiddling her thumbs looking for people to physically attack for no reason. She was sitting cute and pretty in her hospital bed, watching musicals and kissing the love of her life. Does that sound like a monster to you? Doesn't sound like one to me. They brought the fight to her. She was defending herself, and she was defending other people who did not ask for this fight. Those things do not make a monster. She is an actual hero. For all the talk on this show of the heroes that are part of the Vought brand, Kimiko is one of the few true heroes on this show. She has been subjected to horrific violence ever since she was a child, and she survived all of it, and she never lost her humanity. She wants to watch musicals and bake with her boyfriend. She's not the one flying to the other side of the world to inject extremists with Compound V in order to inflate profits for weapons manufacturers. That's a monster.
Let's talk about that.
I still say that the hardest scene to watch this season was Blue Hawk attacking the community center, but Kimiko getting repeatedly assaulted on her abdomen, that was also very high up there. The fact that she was able to stay conscious and keep the mental clarity to spot a large nail to get her attacker and hit him right on the vein, so he was out. Let me reiterate the point. Kimiko is not a monster. She is a survivor. Literally, all I want in season 4 is for there to be some sort of mayhem going on, and Frenchie and Kimiko are just staying inside, baking and making out, and not realizing that the team needs them because their phones died. I want my babies to have a break from all this nonsense that they never asked to be a part of in the first place. So that's more or less all of the main talking points I have to make about this episode. I have 2 other small notes that I'm going to share now. I'm glad that Termite got smushed. He was nasty, and we can use that screen time elsewhere now that he's gone. And Nina getting away doesn't sit right with me. I want her not just 6 feet under, I want her 12 feet under. Terrible character that isn't even a character, it's just a Russia-phobic caricature with an awful accent. I want that out of here. We've already got Homelander, Soldier Boy, and Victoria Newman. Nina is useless when it comes to delivering quality storytelling. Please just get rid of her. I'm tired.
How'd you say it? That's right, questionable.
So those are my thoughts on season 3, episode 6. Let me know what you thought of Herogasm or anything else from this episode. Subscribe for more videos about the boys, as well as other thoughts on films and television series, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.